thank you very much for making your point. And now we will go to staff. Do you have questions of Tatum Taylor? Kim? Kim, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. If you could just make your speaker a little bit louder, please.
It's the best it can do. I'll just yell a
There,
little
this is
bit.
good now. Yeah.
Okay. I just have a question about the designation. Do we need to designate the entire property, or could we designate portions of it that would allow this 8-story housing proposal, which I was not aware of, to proceed? Or is it all or nothing?
Through the chair, I'll take this, Tatum. When under the Heritage Act, you designate a whole property and you list attributes. So the attributes indicate which buildings on the property have value. This board has seen cycle to cycle, year to year developments that include heritage properties. We are working with the owner. They are aware of this action, and we will ensure that the heritage value of this property is conserved along with the important affordable housing that's being proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you very much. With respect to the, and this is for Mary or Tatum, with respect to the proposal that's at planning right now, how does it fit with a designation like this? Like, does the designation itself forbade any development on the site?
I am not aware of a single case in the City of Toronto where a designation has forbade any development on a site.
Has Heritage worked with the developer on what a redevelopment site with a designation of the
We are in that. We are
You're in that process.
We are in that process now. Yes.
How's it looking?
I really couldn't comment.
Okay, that's fair enough. Do the attributes themselves prohibit redevelopment of the site for a mid-use residential?
In my opinion, no, which doesn't mean to say that there wouldn't be things that would have to be, potentially removed or changed, but that's always the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Are there other questions of staff?
Sorry, if I may ask one other question. I think this would be best to Tatum, just because of the presentation, and first of all, like, further to Mary's comments about how great our staff are. This was a really, I think, well-researched report. There's a lens to this that we feel in Chinatown as well, that there are attributes of buildings, there are histories to buildings that are deeply rooted in Chinese history in Canada, and that are at risk of being lost. These cultural resources that like perhaps aren't always reflected in the built form, and I think that's a frustration of a lot of residents, that we can't seem to capture those pieces. We try, and we had some good luck on an application on Spadina when we redeveloped the site. The buildings got knocked down, but we were able to retain some of the commercial characteristics in the new build. So the question is, like, is there a lens here to the anti-Asian hate that we've seen, and the sentiment that we're losing some of that cultural heritage from Asian Canadian community, the Chinese Canadian community, if we lose a building like this? Because like, I heard undertones in your presentation about the research that was done on the importance of recognition of the laundries, the food. Do you care to comment just further on that?
Sure, through the chair, thank you so much for asking that question, Counselor, because I think that really gets at the heart of why this story embodied by this building has an urgency in terms of heritage conservation. This really represents a really important story within the Chinese community in Toronto and even throughout Canada. This is a story about Chinese entrepreneurial spirit at the mid 20th century in the face of political, economic, and social constraints and hardships. And through the kind of accumulated layers of this building, the way that Yi Lum Lee and his partners expanded this to create a company that had a impact across the entire country. People still look for China Lily soy sauce in the grocery store today. And that's an impact that really went towards helping Canadian households be more familiar with these products and have more acceptance and understanding of Chinese culture. So that's why we think this is a really important story.
So this isn't about a mishmash of industrial buildings at this corner. Like if these were if this was an abattoir or a bacon factory or I don't know, like many other uses that didn't have this cultural significance, to a very specific group of people that were incredibly discriminated against in a very real institutional way with the head tax and then and further with what take that away, and this building, while has some value architecturally, probably doesn't have the same significance. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's fair to say. In our statement of significance within the notice of intention to designate, it's not really looking at the building as a great example of like a 1920s Main Street building. It's looking at the adaptation and expansion of that 1920s building by a Chinese company at the end of the 1940s. And so the complex that exists now is really a testament to, again, that entrepreneurship.
The other thing I want to add, Counselor, and thank you, Tatum, for that, bang on, is that we did not list all of the structures as attributes. Tatum was very careful to be quite intentional about what we felt was representative. And again, the conservation strategy will be determined, and it will surely touch this, structures on this property. But this is a really important story, and we just don't believe that we should be squaring off one part of equity against another. I think we have to try to do it all together, and that's what we're doing here.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Tatum. That's it for me.
Tatum, can I just ask you one fast question? From the historical standpoint, the Bianca condo on DuPont replaced the Wings fortune cookie factory, and which then became monolino, or it was monolino typesetting as well. Both have significance to me. Was that the same Wing family? Do you know?
I can't confirm that. I'm not 100% sure. I'm familiar with that property, but I am not aware of whether or not it's the same family.
Yeah, just curious, because it's completely gone. It was not as good looking a building, and the context of that area has certainly changed dramatically.
It is a great example of another story from this community that we have lost kind of the physical representation of.
Right, because the sugar high you used to get walking by that building, I mean, it was like you'd be buzzed. And then for monolino, with my background in publishing, monolino was the best typesetter for large, high quality advertising. So it was very significant, as I said, in two ways for me. So that's why in China Lily, I mean, anyone, there's a soft spot. But I agree very much with Mary that you have to balance everybody's equity. So if there is a way to get the affordable, I mean, I'm sure there will be a way to get the affordable housing. As Mary said, I have yet in my life seen a building not built because every hair of its little heritage head was so carefully preserved. Robert, you're muted.
Sorry, a comment rather than a question, if we're into comment time now.
We're heading in that direction.
Well, I think the point that was raised, that the cost is so unknown in dealing with retention of heritage fabric, that I think, and you made the comment that you don't know of any projects that were halted by retention of heritage. That's because they were probably not advertised as such. They were not publicized in any way. I do have personal knowledge of one project which has been severely handicapped by trying to satisfy heritage issues. And I think we shouldn't talk of that lightly. It is a very real problem. The cost of retaining a facade, for example, it can add millions, literally, to a project, which would make it unbuildable within the framework of affordable housing. So it's easy to say we can find a way through this. I think that the commentator this morning has touched a nerve here, that we have conflicting issues that are very real. Affordable housing is working with very small margins. And one wonders if there's not some other way of honoring the history of a place and of a complex of buildings without hanging on to every fragment that speaks of the old buildings. I mean, I think this is a tough issue that we've got such blunt instruments to deal with it. It's either designation or it's not, you know, which is an unsatisfactory way I think very much so in this context, because we have an admission that the building isn't that special. It's its memories that are special. It's its history. Is there not some way that we can honor that rather than maintaining fabric?
So, Robert, thank you. Through the chair, you have raised a number of really important issues, and I'd like to try to unpack just a few of them, just from the staff perspective. First of all, it is never heritage planning's first wish to see facades. It tends to be much more cost effective to save the whole building. But that isn't what we get. And one of the reasons why we don't get that is because for a very long time, we had as a city extremely high parking requirements. So it was the excavation of the site going down so many stories that made keeping buildings in place impossible. And so that's what we were negotiating. On sites where you don't have to excavate so much underneath, you can underpin, as you know, you can completely carve out the front section, keep it in place. We've even had projects where we've had caissons put behind the back so that the building can remain in place while they excavate underneath. I agree with you. Facade retention, particularly at the scale we see in the city of Toronto, is very expensive. But there are less expensive ways to conserve heritage buildings, and I'm hopeful that when we have now that we have relaxed parking requirements, parking and heritage will not be at odds with each other. As far as the blunt tool, I actually think that the heritage staff that are working on developments actually do a lot subtle, nuanced work, but I know what you mean. We have unfortunately inherited recently new legislation that is distinctly tied the Heritage Act to the Planning Act, and it has been made an all or nothing at this early stage. There are benefits to the clarity, but it is not satisfactory to anybody for us to be in this moment at this time. Having said that, also, I think the issue of equity is so complex that we cannot assume that buildings are not special just because they don't fit our idea of what a beautiful 19th century colonial building looked like. And I'm not saying that to you, Robert. I'm speaking really in general. There is a very non-inclusive understanding of what warrants preservation. And that's problematic throughout North America. And our group in particular has taken a lot of criticism for really focusing on the pretty. We've actually never focused just on the pretty, at least not in the last 15 years I've been with the city. But we're trying to encourage people to understand heritage preservation beyond the bricks. And so, no, commemoration may not be enough to tell this story because people need places and sites. We've heard that all across the city. So we're doing our best to represent all the citizens of Toronto, to understand what's special about their places, while also making sure that we do our best by the people who are trying to deliver other things in this city. And one thing I want to clarify is, at present, the application is purpose-built rental that provides an opportunity for affordable rental. We just confirmed it with the planner. It's not proposed as affordable housing. So we want to be very specific about that. Doesn't mean the rental units won't be affordable. That is not a part of the application, and that is not what is happening now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
So
you, Mary. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I left anything on the table there, but I feel strongly about answering you, Robert, and I look forward to more dialogue about this.
Okay, we're sort of we have flowed into our discussion. Paul?
And I hope I can flow back into a question. And the question is just, has there been, as part of the research of this building, has there been outreach to the Chinese community about this site, and has there been any opinions expressed, or is there a sentiment from that community with respect to this site? I feel a little bit like I do not want to err in either direction by being presumptive, and I'm just not familiar with whether this site is of value to the Chinese community, and whether they would feel that this is something being taken away from them. And so I don't want to be wrong in either direction. So I'm just wondering, do we know, has anyone gone on record about the value of the site?
Tatum?
If I may, and I'll let Tatum expand more on that through the chair. I don't know if any individual can speak for the community, but I do know that one of the leaders of the community, Arlene Chan, has been in touch with Tatum, and or Tatum has been in touch with her, and back and forth. So I'll let Tatum explain her interactions to date.
Sure. As Mary said, I don't want to presume that Arlene speaks on behalf of the entire Chinese community. I did have a very helpful conversation with her, and for those who don't know, she is a leading historian within Toronto's Chinese community and has a particular expertise in Chinese food history as well. And she was really instrumental in my understanding of the impact that the China Lily brand had on, as I said in the presentation, familiarizing Canadian households with Chinese ingredients and helping me understand the social impact of those products.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's make this formal. Are there any other questions of staff before we discuss amongst ourselves? Okay, seeing none, among ourselves, are there any comments you'd like to make? We have a report before us. Kim?
Yes, thank you, Sandra. I mean, I find it is a difficult question about equity. Certainly, it's important that the site seems like such an ideal site, given its position and its size for housing, which is desperately needed in the city. I would just hope that we could have it all, that the design, I mean, it all comes down to design for me. Can we get a design for this 8-story building that takes into account the attributes of this, or commemorates the site, which is, you know, extremely important. And I really appreciate Tatum's presentation on this. There's a lot of things there I didn't know about. And so I think, you know, my first inclination was, well, this seems like such a natural place for housing, but why can't we have both? Why can't we have a really well-designed housing scheme on this corner that can take into account what is there now, what could be kept from there now? And it seems to me there's a process that's been sort of promised to us by Mary, and that this is a process that's going on, and that could happen. That could be a big success, and I hope that it will be.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a report before us. Can I have a motion from somebody to adopt the report? Paul Fairley? Okay, all in favor? Okay, it's approved.